Once upon a time is one of my favorite phrases. It makes me sit forward in my seat and anticipate something awesome, because a well-crafted story and a well-told story, there's just nothing like it. We have movies today, but in Jesus' day, he relied on stories to paint a picture for the people that he wanted to teach. And stories stick with you. I'll bet you've forgotten just about every sermon, but you could tell some of Pastor Wes's stories. Am I right? They stick with us. They speak loudly. Can I just tell you a story today? Oh, good, because stories are my favorite. And what makes this one so incredibly special is how timeless it is. It still applies to us today. And you are in this story, and so am I. In fact, I think I've played all the characters, including the pigs. We'll get to them. So if you have your Bible, it's one of those things with pages in it. If you have your Bible, you're probably going to make it to heaven. But you can use one of those Bibles that glows in the dark, too. You might want to turn to Luke 15. And let's start by putting this story in context. I want you to get a visual, so lower the screen in your mind and use your imagination. Here's what I want you to picture. It's this beautiful, huge home of a prominent Pharisee. It's the Sabbath, so everybody's off work. They're like Chick-fil-A back in the Bible. They take off on the Sabbath. And here is this huge banquet table inside. And Jesus and his 12 men are the guests of honor. And they're surrounded by the religious leaders, the Pharisees and the scribes. However, there's some uninvited guests too. And they're crowding around outside, and they're leaning through the windows. And this is the riffraff, the crowd that followed Jesus everywhere he went and hung on his every word. And they have followed him here today. And Luke tells us about 5 different people that were in Jesus' target audience for this story that he tells. Look at Luke 15:1. Now all the tax collectors and sinners, so let's pause there for a second. The tax collectors were such scumbags, they didn't even qualify to be called a sinner. They're beneath sinners. Already I found myself in this story. They are the dirtbags. So you've got the tax collectors, you've got the sinners, and then you've got something that I find interesting is in the Amplified Version, the non-observant Jews. So what that would mean is they wear the church label, but they don't practice what they preach. They continue to live their own way. And they were all coming near to listen to Jesus, both the Pharisees and the scribes. And you know that these are the ultra-religious. They study the law day and night. They eat, breathe, sleep the law. It's all about the rules. And they use the law to oppress the people, to lord it over them, to constantly be judging them. It was oppressive. So we can summarize the people present and our listeners to this story into 2 categories. And yes, I brought visuals. Sorry, Wes, but I'm a visual learner, so I just assume everybody is. So I think we can categorize the tax collectors and sinners and the non-practicing Jews into this category. We will call them the unrighteous, or for short today, I'm going to call them the URs. And I brought this just to illustrate that they were unclean and dirty. And then you had on this side of the room, well, in the room, you had the self-righteous. But to understand these terms, we have to know what righteous means. Righteous means right standing, that you are standing right with God, that you are acting in accord with divine or moral law, that you are free from guilt or sin. If you're righteous, you can stand before God like this, with your head held high, no shame, no guilt. You are in right standing before God. The unrighteous, the not right with God, were sinful and wicked. Everybody knew it. The tax collectors were not walking around going, I'm great. The self-righteous We're convinced of one's own righteousness, especially in contrast, and they love to contrast, with the actions and beliefs of the others. They were narrow-mindedly moralistic. They like to walk around and be the judge and the jury. And they found everybody guilty that didn't do things exactly the way they thought they should be done. They not only had the laws, but they made up some of their own. So again, to save us time, I'm going to refer to them from time to time as the URs and the SRs. So what happens in verse 2? Why did Jesus tell this story? Well, this is why he told it. Both the Pharisees and the scribes, the SRs, began muttering and complaining, saying, "This man accepts and welcomes sinners to eat with us." Okay, in my imagination, they have a British accent. You can read that however you want to. Remember, the real pastor will be back next week. So that's why Jesus told them this story, because they were complaining at how he treated sinners. Now, I have heard this story that we call the Prodigal Son all my life. And please raise your hand if you were as ignorant as I was until this last week. I never looked up the word prodigal. I just assumed, based on context clues, that it meant somebody that strayed from the faith, somebody that was rebellious. Anybody else never look it up? Okay, thank you. I don't feel quite so dumb. So what it really means is this: spending money or resources freely and recklessly. I do that at the mall anytime I go there. Wastefully extravagant. Wastefully extravagant. And now our story begins. Verse 11. Then Jesus said, "A certain man had 2 sons." This is Jesus' way of saying, once upon a time. And the people loved a story, especially with his, because they never knew what was going to happen. They were so different than what they were expecting or used to. So they all lean in. Right away, he's got their attention. A certain man had 2 sons. Sons were a man's pride and joy. They were his wealth and his legacy. Sorry, ladies, but sons were very important. And the younger of them inappropriately said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the property that falls to me. Give me my inheritance." That took the wind out of the room, because at that moment, they all knew from studying the law and hearing about it that he was basically saying, "Dad, I want you dead. I want my inheritance now." Even in our day, inheritance is not until someone passes away. He said, "I want to break ties with you. I don't want anything to do with you. I want to do things my way." Everyone in the room was now furious. This was prideful, arrogant, and incredibly disrespectful. Have you ever been the younger son? I have. I'm a recovering younger son. Let me ask you just a couple of diagnostic questions and see if you qualify for a younger son. Is it hard for you to deal with authority? With parents, coaches, your boss at work, anybody that's the manager, a supervisor, God's authority and his laws. What about our government and those laws? What about tax laws? What about traffic cops, stop signs, speed limits? They're just to get in my way. How about the 10 items or less checkout line? Do you rebel against wisdom and what you know is best for you? What about for your physical self? Do your appetites drive you? Your food appetite, your sex drive, your need and want for things. I want it now. Do your emotions control you, but it just feels good? Do you struggle with this thought, "You're not the boss of me"? Then you might be a younger son. Verse 12. So he, the father, divided the estate between them. Well, now you could hear a gasp from the entire audience. Because this was unheard of. For a father to actually do what this son is asking for was crazy talk. Are you kidding me? The son was absolutely wrong in what he was asking for. And in fact, they all knew that the law said this son could be stoned to death for what he was doing. That was the punishment for his behavior. And yet the father gave him what he wanted and let him go. Just a little side note, what do you call somebody that you make stay somewhere and work for you? A slave. Just file that away. It was shocking. Verse 13, a few days later, the son gathered together everything that he had, and he traveled to a distant country where the grass was reportedly greener, and there he wasted his fortune in reckless and immoral living. Oh, now everybody's hating on him. Now everybody's hating on him. Not only was he horrible to his father, but he wasted all the father's earnings. That father, no doubt, had to liquidate some of his assets to give the son the 1/3 that came to the younger son as inheritance. All the neighbors would know he was completely publicly humiliated. And now the son wasted it. Oh, they were all gritting their teeth at this son. So, yep, the son gathered up that money, saddled up his horse, and rode straight to Vegas. And he was probably singing that old Jewish song. You probably know it. If you do, sing along. I'm going to take my horse to the old town road. That's beautiful. That was beautiful. You guys are so Jewish. And if you don't know that song, you need to sit over here once in a while and hang out. So you can use your imagination what he did during that next chapter. He got lit. He partied. He made it rain. He had a good time with that money. In fact, I think Charlie Sheen probably sent him a tweet saying, dude, slow it down. At this point, nobody in the audience is sympathizing with him. Nobody has taken his side. He is a total jerk. Verse 14, though, it changes a little bit. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country. Ooh. And he began to do without and be in need. Famine is a word that made that crowd shudder. It's not something that we fear, thank God, but for them it was just terrifying to slowly starve to death, to see your children starve. It would have struck terror in their hearts. The market crashed. It was the Great Depression. And now the country is completely destitute. 15. So he went and forced himself on one of the citizens of the country. He had to completely humiliate himself. He was desperate. He sold everything. None of his friends were picking up. None of his business acquaintances were answering his calls. He exhausted all of his options and had to grovel before this stranger and beg for a job. He was broke. He was homeless. Because beneath the sin, there is always a penalty. It's deceptive in its allure. Sin takes us from delight to disillusionment in one rip the rug out from under your feet moment. And 15, who sent him, this cracks me up, y'all, sent him into his field to feed the pigs. You gotta love Jesus. He put this part in there for dramatic effect, and it worked. He didn't say, so he found a lovely little job baling hay. No. To every Jewish person in the room, this was disgusting. Not just because it's a smelly animal, but because it was ceremonially unclean. For a Jewish person to touch one of the pigs made them unclean. He is now not just guilty to sin against his father, but against his faith. He was now filthy even before God, and the audience was gasping. He lost his Jewish chosen people status in that one job that he took on. 16. He would have gladly eaten the carob pods that the pigs were eating, but they could not satisfy his hunger. That line right there would preach a whole series. And no one was giving anything to him. So he's gone from the penthouse to the outhouse. And maybe you are are feeling a little bit more sympathetic now. Oh, okay, dude, you were a jerk. But this is just sad. I kind of feel for him because I've done some crummy things too, and I've ended up in the pig pen, and it is not a fun place to be. And man, I'm just really glad that your dad can't see you right now. But these guys, he's in the pig pen. This is a good story. I love this story. This is a good one. Jesus would tell stories like this more often because this is the kind of story that teaches these people what we've been saying. If you break the law, there should be consequences. I like this stories in the pig pen. Keep going. They were very satisfied with that outcome. Verse 17 is my favorite. But when he finally came to his senses. When I was in the pig pen, I have had a come to my senses moment. Have you? But when he came to his senses, he said, wait a second. How many of my father's hired men have more than enough food? They've got shelter, they've got clothes, and I'm dying here of hunger. But did you ever notice that the father didn't chase after him? The father did not go after him, did not bail him out, did not send him pig pen care packages. Why? Doesn't that seem like a loving thing for a father to do? It's because it's when you are rock bottom, or in this case, mud bottom, that you can finally hear the truth. You can finally see the truth. You can contrast what you had with where you are now. It's never in our everything's great, prosperous moments that we cry out to God, is it? It's when we're rock bottom and hurting. 18, he says, I will get up. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to my father. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Just treat me like one of your hired men. The son has this pivotal moment. He calls it what it is. It is sin, and he formulates a plan. And the URs are going, yes, yeah, that's a good idea. You should do that. Because look, you're only one of two sons. He's going to have mercy on you. Just let's hope for mercy. Because listen, being a hired hand, doing a life sentence of paying that back with interest is much better than where you are now. It is so worth a shot. Dude, go. This is good. This is good. I like where this is going. Well, that's not exactly what I had in mind for this story. However, it still has some potential. It still has some potential because he could show up at the father's house and the father could slam the door in his face. That would be excellent, don't you think? Because he could say, wait a second, you wanted me dead? Well, now you are dead to me, and slam the door. That would be excellent. What will the father respond? So he got up and came to his father. Oh, they all lean in. What's going to happen? Will it be mercy or justice? Because justice is getting what you deserve. It's a merited reward or punishment. Justice is getting what you deserve. Mercy is deserving punishment, but being spared. And you could hear a pin drop in the place as they all waited to see what the verdict would be. But while he was still a long way off, the father saw him and was moved with compassion for him. Yes, said the URs. Yes, wait a second. He was moved with compassion. I see what Jesus is doing. He's talking about me. He's telling this story about me. The son was unrighteous, and I'm a scumbag tax collector. Yes, that story is, could it be possible that there's hope for me to receive mercy too? I might be eligible for mercy too. That is awesome. And the self-righteous are now super mad. Oh, he is ruining this story with mushy-gushy stuff. Ugh. Why did he have to go there? Justice is what he deserves. He was moved with compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. What? They all gasped again, because running was considered very undignified for the head of a household. Running was for children and servants, not the head of the household, not the father. But this father ran to meet this undeserving son, this smelly, dirty, ragged, half-naked, undeserving, insulting, disrespectful sinner. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. He'd been rehearsing this speech all the way home. For days he had been practicing. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And guess what? He was right. Both sides lean in. Okay, the initial reunion and emotion of that's worn off. Now he'll hear the consequences. Now he'll get the door slammed in his face. But the father said to his servants, oh, wait a second. The son just made this speech he's been rehearsing for days, and the father didn't even acknowledge it, didn't even answer it, didn't even stare him down. No time out. No, okay, but here are the consequences. You're going to have to prove yourself, young man. I'm going to be watching you carefully. There's going to be some time out, and you're going to have to wear the cone of shame for a while. There was no debt discussed, no payment with interest discussed. We tend to measure what we think should happen with a human-sized measuring cup. And we measure based on merit and emotion. And our measuring cup is very leaky. But instead, the father says, quickly to the servants, bring out the best robe. Now, in that day, the robe wasn't just, okay, here's some clean clothes because you look like a mess. The robe signified so much more that now their breath was taken away once again. Because the robe at the hem, down at the bottom, had a border that was carefully embroidered with the family crest, the family identity. It was like the Scottish would wear their family plaid. Everywhere that person went, you knew whose family they belonged to. When the father put that robe on the son, what was he saying? You are restored back into the family. You are wearing my name, son. You are restored. And I love this. The little tassels down at the bottom, there were 4 special little tassels, and this is my new favorite word. It's pronounced tzitzit. The tzitzit were carefully crafted. They had that little blue thread in there that was a symbol of priesthood. He's restored in that one instant, restored back to the family, and restored to the Jewish faith, to priesthood. No longer dirty and hanging out with the pigs. He is now wearing a robe of righteousness. A robe of righteousness before God. There were gasps all around for sure. And now you wear the robe of righteousness. Bring a ring for his finger. Now this wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was worn on the index finger, right between these knuckles. And probably one of these days I'm going to get a tattoo right there. Just wait. Because it symbolized so much. It was called a signet ring. It bore the family name and crest. And everyone is gasping, are you kidding me? He has the family identity. He has his Jewish faith. And now he can command the household again. And if he pressed it into the wax, he could sign a deal, sign an agreement. He could sign at the marketplace. It was credit. It was authority. It was power. And I feel certain that that's where, to this day, we get this. Put that down. Put that back. And I'm going to need these curtains replaced and put that over there. It showed the entire household, my son is back, and you need to listen to him and respect him. Bring a robe, bring the ring, and bring sandals for his feet, because slaves and servants did not wear shoes. You are not a slave any longer. You are my son. Put these sandals on your feet. Walk with me. And then, just a cherry on top, he says, and bring the fattened calf and slaughter it. Oh, now they're all just speechless. They're spitting because the fatted calf was very important. Being as overweight as you are introduces risk for diabetes, heart problems, and most worrisome, sacrifice. They kept that in a pen. They fed it extra. It didn't work out. It was quite chubby. And it was used in sacrifice and celebration. And today it was used for both. And we get uncomfortable in our culture when we talk about the shedding of blood. But let me tell you, it is all important for the forgiveness of sins. Hebrews 9:22, without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. Because there's a third son behind the scenes in this story. The one who was our perfect sacrifice and redeemed us. So this fatted calf became both atonement, both forgiveness, and celebration. Because guess what? Afterwards, they get to eat it. Yes. We have to talk about food at least once a Sunday. I think Wes said it's the rule. We either have to talk about Chick-fil-A or Krispy Kreme, our sponsors. Just kidding, they're not our sponsors. But yes, they got to eat it afterwards and have a party. And he said, let's invite everyone and feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was as good as dead and he's alive again. He was lost and he's found. So they began to celebrate. Curtain. And we kind of want to end there with, and they all lived happily ever after. But they didn't all live happily ever after. Look at verse 25. Now his older son was in the field, and when he returned and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. So he summoned one of the servants and began asking, what was this celebration? And he said to him, your brother has come home, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he received him back safe and sound. But the elder brother became angry and deeply resentful and was not willing to go into the party. Not willing to go in. And his father came out and began pleading with him. But he said to his father, look, these many years I have served you, and I've never neglected or disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given to me so much as a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this other son of yours arrived, who's devoured your estate with immoral women, you slaughtered the fatted calf for him? What did the older brother want? Because now these guys are listening to the story and they're squirming because the spotlight's on them. It was obvious who the younger brother was. Everybody knew that he was talking about the sinners that can come home to mercy. But now these guys are going, oh, he's talking about us, because he wanted justice. He wanted justice for this brother. And do you notice that the brother, when he's talking to the father, he doesn't say, Father, look, these many years. He just says, look. And when he refers to his brother, he says, this other son of yours. He doesn't talk about him as his brother. He refers to him as your other son. He has removed himself from the family. He's not at the party. He's not at the celebration. He's not enjoying the joy of the Father. He has removed himself just as much as the younger son did. both were equally wrong. This one removed himself in a sinful way. This one removed himself by doing good. And they were both missing out on the heart of the Father when they stepped away. Are you an older brother? Have you ever been? I have. Are you a Pharisee and in this category? Let me ask you a couple questions. Are rules and laws and justice more important to you than mercy and forgiveness? Do you ever use guilt to control people? Do I secretly feel a little bit glad when somebody I don't like or somebody I feel threatened by or is in competition with me fails or has something bad happen to them? Do I keep score of all the ways that I keep the rules and so doesn't? When somebody is speeding in and out of traffic, now this happened to me the other day. Can I just have a confessional moment of how awesome I am? Someone was speeding in and out, weaving in and out of traffic, and I just said, Lord, protect them. Help them not to hit anybody. No, what do we do? Where is a cop when you need one? Weaving in and out of traffic. Not 4 minutes later, there he was, pulled over to the side of the road. His entire front bumper was off and stuck in the back bumper of the truck in front of him. And so I said, oh, Lord, please help his insurance to cover that awful mishap. No, I laughed out loud. That is big brother behavior. That's judgmental. And we all have a touch of him inside of us. Do I come to church to earn points? Do I give and serve and attend so that I can ask for blessing and favor? Do I ever ask, why me? Do I ever say it's not fair? Do I ever feel like, okay, well, maybe I'm forgiven, but I still have to earn. I still have to pay for what I did. This isn't in your notes, but just jot down this reference and look it up in the Amplified, because this is what it says in Ephesians 2:8-9. For it is by grace that you have been saved, actually delivered from judgment and given eternal life through faith. And this salvation is not of yourselves, not through your own effort, but it's the undeserved, gracious gift of God. Not as a result of your works, nor your attempt to keep the law, so that nobody can boast or take credit in any way for their salvation. 31, the father said to him, Son, you're always with me, and everything that I have is yours. The son said to the father, but I slaved for you. And the father says, that was your word. That was your choice, not mine. Hanging in the closet is a robe with your name monogrammed on it. Wear it. You've got the ring on your finger, son. Use it. You know where I keep the fatted calf. Dude, throw your own party. What if we lived in such a way that we walked in the authority of God as a son, as a daughter of the King? How would that change our life? And the father says, but it was fitting, it was appropriate for us to celebrate and rejoice, for this brother of yours was as good as dead, and now he has begun to live. He was lost, and now he's been found. Do you know fair is not in the Father's vocabulary? So once again, justice is what we want other people to get. Mercy is what we want if we get caught. But what this story is about today is grace. And grace is reward and favor when we deserve punishment. Our human minds can't even comprehend that. So that's why I think maybe instead of calling this story the prodigal son, maybe it should be called the prodigal father. Because his gifts and his favor and his blessings toward us are extravagant. And I have an image I want to leave with you for this week. A picture. Because they both strayed away from home. They both left the Father's table. And all he wants is for you to come home. Would you just close your eyes for one moment?